My name is Paul, I'm an alcoholic. And that's exactly what needed to be read. Thank you so much, Bob. And just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, here I am again, you know. And I hope you had a nice lunch. My lunch consisted of, I figured let me go and work out in the gym, you know. So I go down to the gym and there's one elliptical and there's somebody on it. So right away I got a resentment, you know. And so I go on the treadmill. I pulled a muscle a few weeks ago, but I go on this treadmill and there's this, you know, pretty girl on the elliptical. So like, I'm thinking to myself, so I put the incline up I never go on ellipticals. All of a sudden I got the incline, it's as high as it can go. I'm like in the foothills of the Himalayas, like a Sherpa, you know, trying to like walk up this thing. The next thing I pull the muscle in my leg again, and I'm thinking, now what did Dawn say? You know, I wanted to scream out all these profanities, but I didn't. And I'm waiting for the taste of metal in my mouth. It didn't come, you know. And so then, like, I went in here, like, you know, walked into the gym, like, hey, look at me. And now I'm limping out of the gym like Lassie, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, and back to the hotel room to regroup, you know. And, oh, my God, my sponsor's so true. Without this program, I'm finished, you know. But talking here about, and it's funny how this is, and we were just talking about this outside, you know. The speakers have been wonderful so far, and a lot of things, you know, that's exactly what I was going to say, and that's what I was going to say. But it's so true. It's a program. It's not. This program is a program of spiritual repetition. I'm not saying we sit down here and dogmatically remember line for line, but the same things. We have the same experiences. We bring the same things to the table, and maybe the people and the places and the events were somewhat different, but the feelings are always the same. This commonality that we have. And that's why I was sitting here today and this morning when the guys were talking, yes, 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 over and over and over again. And that's why I belong in Alcoholics Anonymous, because this is the place where people understand. They understand this squirrely type of thinking that I have. This, as Bill Wilson referred it to, a screwball neurotic. And as I said last night, and I get past the point now of trying to decipher and trying to maybe get some sort of like spiritual Rosetta Stone and decipher exactly why do I feel the way that I do and why do I think this way. And today I just accept that fact. And I feel very fortunate that I have a program that works under all conditions. That if I'm working this spiritual basis for living, those voices and those fears and phobias and faulty dependencies, they might never go away completely, but I can keep them under lock and key today. And it's like the obsession to drink. That obsession to drink, I believe, will never fully go away. I have it today under spiritual lock and key because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. But if I don't work this program, that lock will get picked. And it won't be the thought of a drink. The thought can come in here. And I mean that obsession where you wake up each morning and the thought of a drink's right there. And I don't want the thought of me to be right there every morning when I wake up. And that's why I try to put these principles into my life to the best of my ability. You know, perfection is a hope and a dream and an illusion, and will get a guy like me drunk. I'm not saying underachievement is a virtue worth striving for, but Alcoholics Anonymous allow me to strive for averageness. I do the first half of the first step perfectly each day, and everything else is up for grabs on a daily basis. As I said last night, there's days I'm sober, and there's days I don't drink, but the good news is I know the difference today. I know when I got that stone in my shoe, and I know what to do. And I got a program that works under all conditions, if I'm willing to work it. And it's a program that's not a theoretical program. It's pure pragmatism. These early guys that come in here, the first 100 whose experience we draw from the book, they kept what worked, and they got rid of what didn't work. And I love this program because it is so pragmatic. I think the 12 steps. The 12 steps, they don't line out the program of recovery in some sort of theoretical. These steps are designed, they're such a design for living that not only do they lay out the program of recovery, they also record your progress. When I come into AA, I looked, I said, humility, know nothing about it. Him, no idea who he is. Shortcomings, I don't know what that means. And my sponsor says, don't worry about it. As you work through the first 6 steps, and guess what, when I got to step 7, I had some degree of humility because it admitted complete defeat. I took a hard look at myself in 4 and 5. I knew who him was because I was trying to draw myself closer and develop a relationship with him. And because of the fourth and fifth step, I realized I got a full knowledge of my condition and my shortcomings. So if you're new out here today and you're thinking, oh, this stuff these guys are talking about, don't worry about it. As you work through the program, more will be revealed. And I believe the program Alcoholics Anonymous, we often say, you know, you go 10 miles into the forest, you have to go 10 miles out. I don't believe that in AA. Maybe you're sitting out there this morning. Maybe you're saying, Paul, I ain't laughing. I don't know when I'll ever laugh again. I backed myself into a corner in Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I'm here to tell you, I don't care how deep and how dark that forest might seem that you're in right now. My program tells me, not my program, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous tells me you're just 12 steps away from a new life. That's all, just 12 steps away. And talking about as alcoholics, and we are different, and I've heard different stories. I mean, we run the gamut here. I heard a lady there, Clancy was one of the speakers too. I heard a lady speak there not so long ago, and she had this idyllic, would have made the Cleavers look dysfunctional, this idyllic life. And she was as alcoholic from the tip of her head to the tops of her toes. My sponsor, not my sponsor, well, the guy that 12-stepped me was sitting in a meeting in 1966 in New York, and Bill Wilson walked in, impromptu. He used to run around with a priest, Father Joe R., and he was asked to speak. And he got up and he spoke for an hour, and he spoke about 3 events. His parents getting separated, his father moving away when he was a young child, his mother moving to California, which at the time was like moving to the other side of the world to pursue a medical degree, and then his childhood sweetheart, Bertha Bamford, died suddenly over the weekend, his puppy love. And he talked at length how those 3 events set up like a perfect storm that had him tagged with all sorts of faulty hang-ups, faulty dependencies on people and places and things that dogged him his whole life before AA and in AA. So that tells me I don't really know what's going on here, because you're going to have people coming here with a perfect childhood and then somebody like myself coming in here with a checkered past, and we still end up with a screwball neurotic thinking. This doesn't seem right, you know, and I believe this program, I must engage in this. You can bring a horse to water. You can make him thirsty. But sooner or later, I got to take a drink of the spiritual waters that are on offer here. You know, and a guy says to me, Paul, in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's your miracle. The least you can do is participate in it. You see, I'm the sort of an alcoholic, I want you to do the steps, and I'll feel better. I'm always looking something for nothing. That's the story of my life. You see, I believe everything in AA is cause and effect. The effect is today, I'm walking around today a free man for the most part. And that didn't happen. That happened because of the cause. And the cause was that I was willing to go through this program. I was willing to look at these steps. I was willing to look at my part in it. I was willing to let go absolutely of all my old ideas. You know, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I talked about it last night. I came in here and I thought I could put down the drink and live happily ever after. That works if you're a heavy drinker. That works if you're a non-alcoholic. That does not work if you're an alcoholic. Because my disease, it's physical, and it's mental, and it's spiritual, and it's wrapped up in a body full of sick emotions. Not drinking is a good start. Bill Wilson says it's a start, but just a brief start. It must be followed up by other actions. These actions that I must take. And the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is I thought I had to intellectually agree with these actions before I was willing to take them. Absolute nonsense. I thought I had to sign off on this. Okay, I see why I've got to do this 3rd step. I see why I've got to... It might help. From my experience, I've taken guys through the program kicking and screaming, and I've taken guys through who walked through with some decorum and grace. But guess what? The result was the same at the end. They both had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And I believe these steps, they bring us from a place of powerlessness, not to a place where we're powerful in step 12, but a place where we have access to power, 24/7 on unlimited supply. And the key for me, and it's been said this over and over this weekend, so I'm not reinventing the wheel here, the key for me was as an alcoholic, in that bondage of self, 2.5 years off drink, crazier off drink than I was on it. A guy said to me, Paul, do you want God's will in your life? I said, absolutely. I can't live like this anymore. I realize my life's unmanageable. It's actually unbearable. He says, well, Paul, you got to get rid of the stuff that's blocking God's will from coming into your life. Have you any idea what that is? And I had no idea. He said it's resentments, and it's harms, and it's fears, and it's defects of character, and it's shortcomings. He said, I'm not a theologian, but I believe you say you want to have a relationship with a higher power, and I believe he wants to have a relationship with you. But how can the sunlight of the Spirit get into your life when you have all this stuff blocking it? And that was a metaphor that I could get my head around. And I'm standing here this morning for the most part, and I'm living in the sunlight of the Spirit as we all are. I don't want to live that other life anymore. I love that scene in The Lost Weekend where Ray Milan wakes up and he knows he's got a second bottle of whiskey somewhere, but he doesn't know where he put it. And he's sitting there and the panic's setting in. I need a drink, and every nerve ending screaming for a drink. And then he looks up and there's a shadow going across the ceiling and the bottle's hit up on the light fixture. Now, Billy Wilder wasn't an alcoholic, but he knew about imagery. And that shadow, and the imagery's right there, living under the shadow of a whiskey bottle. I lived under the shadow of a bottle of booze for a long, long time. I'm not doing that today. I'm trying to live in the sunlight of the Spirit with these people. I'm trying to be free. Adrian and I were talking last night and today. We're from the same part of the world, Northern Ireland. We both about the same age, grew up during the Troubles. I talked a lot about freedom. I could have given you lectures on freedom. I could have told you why this, why that. I didn't know anything about freedom. I've experienced real freedom from the bondage of self in Alcoholics Anonymous. Not an intellectual exercise where I'm willing to put these things into my life and get free and live in the one place that I never lived, which is today. And put this stuff behind me. And I'm not saying that that I've done this perfectly, but I'm willing to do the deal on a daily basis. And for me, and the thing about these resentments, and it was talked about it here earlier on today, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 30 years of age, had this rogues gallery, and these of defects of character, of people that had hurt me, and intellectually it makes sense. But it's been my experience that these resentments, they have no IQ. They don't say to you, like, let me give you one event. We were put out of our house, 73, was it 73 or 74? The neighbourhoods were being ghettoized, and we were put out of our house in the middle of the night by the opposing paramilitaries. It was a scary time as a young kid. I wished I could have done something, but I couldn't. I felt less than. I felt I should have stepped up. And we moved out of the house and whatever. Now, I was sitting 20 years later with that resentment. I'm sitting in a bar in New York, and I'm thinking about this resentment. I wish they would come to the door now. It would be a different story. And these resentments have no IQ. They don't say, Paul, this happened 20 years ago and 3,000 miles away. I'm experiencing like they're happening right now at that visceral level, and all the spiritual toxicity that's released in your life when you're living your life under those parameters. And I was doing this in every area of my life. I was full of fears. I was a fearful person. As I said, a fearful person will always find something to be afraid of. There's a boogeyman behind every tree. Harms. And for me, and the thing about resentments in the Irish, I know, you know, the old joke, Irish Alzheimer's, you forget everything but your resentments, you know, all that, you know, heard it all before, you know, you heard it all before. But the Irish, I mean, like, I don't know, maybe all cultures like this, but we seem to have, like, not only are you dealing with your own resentments, you're dealing with resentments from previous generations. You know, like your grandfather wants to see you, he's on his deathbed. Will you go up and see him? You go up there as a young child. Do you know what that guy did to our family in 1847 round the corner? And I'm like, don't worry, private resentment, junior first class, reporting for duty. I'll sort that son of a gun out. And I'm taking this on. They're like bequeathed like family heirlooms from one generation to the next. You know, and I'm carrying this all in, and I'm intellectualizing it, and I'm actualizing it. And I'm sitting in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm 2.5 years off drink. As I said, my life's fallen apart. I've been to jumping off place twice in my life, once with drink, once without it. Different type of pain. And the guy says, Paul, you ready for the second surrender? Yes, you've surrendered to alcohol. Yes, you put the plug in the jug. But do you want to be an arm's length away from a drink, or do you want to be 12 steps away from a drink? There's a big difference. A big difference. And I believe that today. By moving through that program, I'm 12 steps away from a drink. And that obsession to drink is based on the spiritual lock and key in the subconscious of my mind. And if I practice these principles, I'll be okay one day at a time. As I said last night, it's not a pardon, it's just a reprieve. And maybe that's the way sobriety has to be. Maybe you got to earn this thing on a daily basis. Maybe you got to earn your right to be sober in this world one day at a time. That I can't coast in Alcoholics Anonymous. That there is no free lunches. That I get through that door in a gift. And everything else I must work for. And I come in here and had all these resentments, and I fought this fourth step, and I fought it, and I fought it, and I said this at a convention last week, I'm such an alcoholic. And then I fought it, and I said to myself, I'm going to do a fourth step. I'm going to do the best fourth step anybody's ever done in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to do a fourth step. They might have to put an appendix in the big book and add it in. I'm going to do a fourth step where newcomers will come up to me and say, are you the guy that wrote that fourth step that everybody talks about? You know, I wanted people to stand around the coffee pot and discuss it. You know, and it's so true. But you know what? It's a matter of getting these things down. It's a matter of getting these things down on paper. And I tell you what, putting this stuff down on paper helped me. It helped me realize the futility and the fatality of these resentments, real or imagined. This stuff, when it's up in my head, it almost has that snowball effect. It just gathers steam and gathers momentum. When I was put this stuff down on paper, and I was able to step back and detach and look in and seeing how these things were blocking me from my life, and realize that I had to put these principles in to get free. And like I said last night, I had to open that door and let the prisoners go free if I wanted to leave the prison as well. And it's not easy. But the spiritual life is not a theory. It must be lived. And I had to say to myself, what price am I willing to pay to get free in Alcoholics Anonymous? What price am I willing to pay to get free and stay free in AA? And the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous, it's hope in human form. I said, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one. I seen people doing what was required here. I'll share a story with you. I'm 2.5 years off drink. I went back, I created all these jackpots in New York. I go back to Northern Ireland, running away. I go back to over there for a vacation. I'm sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm with this guy. And about 15 years earlier, he was at a party. And a guy came up to him behind him at a party over some perceived slight and took a long knife and stuck it into his neck. Almost killed him. He got the lacerations about 3 times. He can't turn his head the whole way around. He could only lift his arm up this far. And me and him now were sitting. He had about 4 years sobriety. I had about 2.5 years off drink, sitting in AA. And we're sitting there in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in a small provincial town in a very insular neighborhood. And the door opened. And the guy had done this and went to jail for quite a while. And the door opened. And who walked in? But the guy that stuck the knife in his neck 15 years earlier. And everybody knew this story. It was well known in the neighborhood. And the whole, I know they had that hum before the meeting starts and everything just fell quiet. And my friend, not for any aplomb or not for any spiritual virtues, he got up and he walked over and he called the guy by his first name. And he put his hand out and he says, Barry, it's good to see you. And the guy was in bad shape. Looked like he was the worst world coming off a bad drunk. And my friend Paddy put out his hand and wished him well. and went over and poured a half cup of tea and put it into his trembling hand. And I was driving home from the meeting that night with Paddy. And I says, Paddy, you know something? If I hadn't seen that, I wouldn't have believed it. He says, Paul, if I have to forgive the man that almost took my life to get free in Alcoholics Anonymous, that's the price I'm willing to pay today. And I said to myself, Paul, as the book says, the inventory is ours. What price am I willing to pay? And it wasn't very much. And I came back to New York, and for the first time, I took a look at my part in it. I took a look at these things because I wanted to be free. And I realized that the program is laid out in the spiritual path of action. And it's in forgiving that one is forgiven. I can't go and knock on your door in step 9 and ask you to forgive me if I'm still holding resentment to a guy around the corner over here. That's not how this thing works. It's in forgiving that one's forgiven. And I'm 2.5 years off drink, as I said there, and I'm just shackled to self. And my life's falling apart, and things are happening to me that shouldn't be happening to people with 2.5 years off drink. I'm thousands of dollars in debt that I was saying there last night. I'll give you one example of my unmanageable life. When you're living under these parameters, when you're living this dog-eat-dog, when you're not living this spiritual life, only just snippets of it. I'm driving out of the Lincoln Tunnel in New York one time. Sorry, the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, going up under the Gowanus Expressway, and this guy cut me off. And I went after him. This is 2.5 years off booze. And I went after him, and I jammed him up against the guardrail. And I got out of that car, and I didn't know who was behind the wheel of the other car. It could have been Tony Soprano for all I knew, and I didn't care, to be honest with you. And I got out of that car, and there was an Asian family in the car. Husband, wife, 3 kids in the back. And the husband's sitting shaking behind the wheel, and the wife's crying, and the kids are crying in the back of the car. I was so ashamed of myself. I apologized profusely. I got into the car, I banged the steering wheel, and I'm crazier off drink than I was on it. I drove straight to my sponsor's house. I told him what I just told you. He said, how old were you when this happened? I said, what do you mean, how old was you? You're not listening to what I'm saying. It happened 20 minutes ago. He said, how old were you when this happened? And then I realized what they were talking about. The psychiatrist that had Bill Wilson talked about His Majesty the baby. And that's what I was in AA. I want what I want, and I want it right now. Trying to squeeze some sort of serenity out of the towel of life. And I'm here to tell you that you can duck and dive in this program for a while, but I'm telling you, if you be alcoholic, and I was, there's no hiding place in here. I've looked for the loopholes. There is none. When you take those 12 steps on board, there's no hiding places in here. That friend of mine was sitting in Bill's office in 1967, and they were pretty close. Close enough to walk in and sit down and talk to him. And my friend, the guy that 12-stepped me, was carrying this thing around, this one thing. You know how we carry that one thing and let it define us and decree us as a person, and he wouldn't let it go? Today, he talks about it freely from the podium. But at that time in 1967, and he spoke to Bill Wilson at length, and Bill Wilson says to him, which apparently he did in these situations, he talked about, rather than the singular, he talked about the collective experience of Alcoholics Anonymous. He says, Jerry, it's been our experience that those members who try to carry the load alone pay a heavy price. They may not drink, but they pay a heavy price regardless. And my friend Jerry listened to him, left his office. A week later, the obsession came on to drink again. He drank. 3 more drunks. The good news is he's back since 67. He came back into AA, finally was willing to go to any lengths. Now, he tells that story today, and he tells that story, and it's very poignant. He says, you can be sitting one-on-one with the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, but if you're not willing to do what's required around here, that in itself will not keep you sober. That it's these actions that we take, as I said, mostly against my better judgment, that will ensure sobriety, some degree of serenity, and peace of mind a day at a time. People talk about happiness. As far as I'm concerned, for this alcoholic, happiness is overrated. I will settle for peace of mind any day of the week. To be comfortable in my own skin 24/7. And I'm not saying I did those steps and all of a sudden everything came together. But I've moved through this here and then taken other guys through the steps and realizing on a daily basis, I've seen people, because drink alone, or the fear of a drink alone. I sponsor a guy, once again, wouldn't go holding, and these resentments, they're not a one-shot deal. I've had resentments in Alcoholics Anonymous, they're residual. They come back. Different form, different fashion, and you got to deal with them the same way. And we always say here about, yes, it is a complex disease, but the solution is very simple, and it's unity, service, and recovery. And it doesn't matter how complex my problem or resentment may seem, the solution is always very simple if I'm willing to take it. And the way for me to take my spiritual temperature in AA, stick that thermometer in, unity, service, and recovery. Am I doing all three areas? If I'm not, I better talk to somebody. And this guy that I was sponsoring, he lost his eyesight. And he got a resentment against God, which is getting resentment against Alcoholics Anonymous, which is getting a resentment against yourself. And he drank again. And by the time he called me, he was in and out and in and out. I'm just telling this for anybody that just knew that. When you think you've hit bottom, there's somewhere else. And I'm lying there one night and I get this phone call, and I hadn't heard from him for about a week. I knew he was probably drinking again. And I get this phone call right after Christmas. I'm lying there, post-Christmas blues, feeling sorry for myself. This pain in my arm is probably like, and this knot in my head is probably a huge brain hemorrhage. I have to go and get a CAT scan, Lying there feeling sorry for myself. And the phone rings and it's my friend. And I hear this croaky voice. Paul, it's Tommy. I said, where are you? He said, I just woke up in Elmhurst General Hospital and my left arm is gone. I says, what? He said, I got drunk. And can you imagine coming out of a blackout? Was drinking in New York City, fell on the subway tracks. The subway train ran over his arm. Came out of a blackout in a hospital. His left arm's gone. Now he's still losing his eyesight. Now his left arm's gone. And he's drunk. And I went over to the hospital, got in the car, and I drove over there. And I signed for his clothes. And he had this little denim jacket. And part of the heat off that train, it was like somebody went across his denim jacket with a laser. It was just cut clean. And he came out of that hospital. I'm going to tell you something. He drank after that. The good news is he's sober now. So I'm telling you, whatever price you're willing to pay, it could be paid, because people go, oh, I've realized the hard way that that's not a revolving door. That you go out there, maybe I'll see you in the summertime, or maybe I'll see you in the fall. When I take that drink back, when I take my will back at that level, all bets are off. I don't know what's going to happen. And that tells me, like, as I said there, I'm speaking to Jerry, who was sitting there with Bill Wilson. I was carrying all this stuff around. And I had to let go absolutely of it. And these resentments, and this forgiveness, it's the old story. If you're going to eat crow in Alcoholics Anonymous, you might as well eat it when it's fresh. Don't wait for this land on the sidewalk for a few weeks. And it's the same with this program. Our steps say, delay is dangerous and rebellion is fatal. This I will never forgive. I can't. And intellectually these things make sense, but spiritually they make no sense at all. And I'm 2.5 years off drink, as I said there, and I was willing to do what's required. And it's an ongoing process, and that's what sobriety is. Sobriety for this alcoholic, it's not a destination, it's a journey. It's not an event, it's a process. And it's a daily reprieve based on my spiritual condition. And it's been my experience that in the darkest days in Alcoholics Anonymous, and to stay sober here, that's another thing I had. I thought I'd come into AA and I would get immunity from life. And that's not been true. What I've been given is the ability to deal with life on life's terms, one day at a time, whether I like it or not. And there's things that have happened, to other alcoholics. And what this program said to me, they said to me, Paul, we're not going to say that your life's going to get better. What we say is that you will get better. And by spiritual de facto, if you get better, chances are your life will get better too. And I've seen people that forgiveness. I talked about my friend being stabbed in the neck. We talked about it last night, talking again to Adrian, my countryman. I was home there in Northern Ireland a few weeks ago, and we went back to a guy's house after it. And these two guys at one time in their lives would have killed each other, literally. And they're sitting in a guy's house. We're having coffee and talking about our sober lives. I don't see this anywhere else. I see it in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was talking to a friend of mine who lives down in South Africa, and he was saying in the darkest days of apartheid, there was only one place that people sat of different colours, and it was in Alcoholics Anonymous. I remember I was asked to speak at a meeting in Belfast. I was home on vacation, and things were really, really bad in the Troubles. One of the leading paramilitary guys had been killed in prison, and the country just, it was bad. And we went down to this meeting, and things were pretty bad. We went down there, and we drove over to a part of town that guys like myself of my religion normally wouldn't be in. And we got to the meeting, and there was these guys standing outside, members, and they welcomed us, and they knew where we came from, and they knew the effort we had made to get there. And there was these kids hanging around, and they have a thing there they call joyriding, where they steal cars and drag them around and then burn them. And the guy says, I'll never forget this, he says, hey kids, you see that car? These guys are friends of ours. Just keep an eye on that. And we walked into that meeting, and we left everything else at the door, and we talked about our collective experience, strength, and hope of how we try to live this spiritual life. And I realized that they're no different than me, and I'm no different than them, that we're alcoholics trying to do the deal one day at a time. I'm not going to say we left the meeting and went skipping down the street singing Kumbaya, you know, but I felt better knowing that they were sober in the world, and I think they felt knowing that we were sober in the world. And that's just on the greater picture, but in a personal thing. The reason that I have to forgive, and there are words that I don't want to hear, the reason I have to forgive, or if I want to forgive, is, God bless you, is to be free. And that's the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a program, it's so... I know this is a worldwide fellowship. I've been for the good fortune, been in meetings in all parts, many parts of the world. Well, I tell you something, and this is a postcard from my part of the world. I don't think this program would start anywhere else only here. This program, it's as American as apple pie. It's got freedom. It's egalitarian. You decide how you want to fly in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm here to tell you from a person that's from another part of the world, I thank you for that. Because Alcoholics Anonymous came to my country, my birth, in 1946. And if there was ever a country needed AA, believe me, it was Ireland. And you think about this wonderful program that we have, and we shouldn't discount the non-alcoholic. Bill Wilson, by his own admission, was a plagiarist. He got the disease concept from Dr. Silkworth. A body won't let us drink and a mind won't let us stop. He got the solution from Carl Jung, a program, a spiritual awakening. And then he got the process in between from Frank Buckman and the Oxford group. And Bill Wilson took the three parts together, and for the first time in thousands of years, there was now a simple solution for a very complex problem where people like me can walk in here in the worst end of their lives and come in here and eventually take a hard look at themselves and swallow some huge chunks of truth about themselves, and in doing so get free and start to live in the one place that they never lived, which is right here and right now. And with these resentments and these fears and harms and all ties in with forgiveness, for me it's not a one-shot deal. I'm dealing with stuff right now. I'm not going to go into the details because we're being taped. But I'm telling you, 20 years sober. Resentment, I said last night, up to here. I said to myself, in the early days, I'm like, are you not getting these spiritual blueprints that I'm sending up there? This was not in my deal at all. Absolutely not. And sobriety for me in Alcoholics Anonymous is a reality check on how life is going today. How the rubber meets the road today. And what am I willing to do today to get free and stay free? And I got dealt this, and the anger. And thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to tell you something. In those dark nights of the soul, and I had a few of them, I couldn't get to God, but I can get to you. And God works through people. And people get people sober. This is not some sort of intellectual exercise, 12 separate events. This is a spiritual process that works through one alcoholic to another. And it's sad, I was sitting in a car there with 3 people, and it just reminded me of that, the simplicity of this program, that even in a complex problem like I was going through, the simple solution. I was in a car with Liz B, who's sober 61 years in July, Tom K, who came in 49, he was the wonder boy, his words not mine, had 5 years and got drunk, he's got 56 back. And Don D, who's got 57 years. And I sat in a car with them for 5 hours. And I thought I was going to hear what's going on behind the curtain. The stuff they don't tell you that you're sober 30, 40, 50 years. You know what I heard? I heard simple stuff. I heard spiritual simplicity. I heard people who had taken this program over day at a time, decades. And it wasn't like their program was there and their lives were here and there's 2 separate events running in like 2 trains running. No. Their lives were their program, and their program was their lives. And it was a spiritual tapestry where you couldn't tell where one ended and one began. And I said to myself, now that's the spiritual life that they're talking about in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not spiritual calculus. Divide the 3rd step, multiply it by the 5th step, and that equals serenity. No. It's this program being not a separate event in my life, but being intrinsic in my life. Because my alcoholism, I always look for the solution outside. The solution was inside because the problem was inside too. I'm an alcoholic. Why that happened, I'm not going to get in that debate in society. Why did I have that stone in the shoe? Why do I think differently than most of the population? I don't care anymore. I just accept the fact I'm an alcoholic. And for me, 20 years sober, I'm getting dealt that. And the duplicity, and the deceit, and the anger. Now the thing about anger, and they say we talk about anger all the time, and it goes hand in hand with forgiveness. Why can we not be angry? I'll tell you why I can't be angry. I don't know about you guys, but I'll tell you why I can't be angry. Because if I'm angry, I become unbalanced. If I become unbalanced, I start making bad decisions. If I start making enough bad decisions, I'll make the ultimate bad decision. So that's why anger is a luxury this alcoholic cannot afford. I can't afford. I have a family member. They're not happy unless they piss 5 people off a day. They get off on that. I can't live life under those parameters. I can't get away with that stuff. And maybe Scott Pack talks about the road less travelled. And this is the road less travelled. And we're very fortunate because we had the definable illness. And the road gets less. There's things I was doing 2, 3, 4 years sober that might get me drunk today. But the road gets narrower. And it's like that spiritual ballast. You're in that lifeboat and you say, 10 years sober, I can't give this up. And then you're 15 years sober, you say, I don't want this. I don't need this. I thought I really needed this. I don't need this. This is holding me back. And I'm here to tell you that this program works under all conditions. And I reached out, and there was people there, because people get people sober. And in those dark nights of the soul, when I couldn't get to another alcohol, I said I couldn't get to God, I could get to you. And that one person, I sort of touched on it last night, I was phoning guys, I don't mean 7 o'clock at night, I'm phoning guys at 3 o'clock in the morning. Because I would sleep for like an hour out of exhaustion and then wake up, totally awake. And the problem's right here. I can't deal with that alone. If I'm doing Alcoholics Anonymous alone, I'm not doing Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm doing something, but it's not AA. And I don't want to do this alone. And I want to wear life like a loose garment. I don't want to live shackled to self anymore. I don't want to be in that spiritual straitjacket. I don't want to live that way anymore. Because you know what? I've seen the other side of the street. I've seen that other way. I don't want to go back to the old ways. Resentment, anger, fear, defects of character, spiritual sickness. And Alcoholics Anonymous, through you people, showed me how. You know what I thought courage was? I worked in a crazy bar. I mean a crazy, crazy bar. It was the sort of bar you get thrown into rather than out of, you know. A lot of, drug, loan sharks, gamblers, the whole 9 yards. I thought courage, you know what I thought courage was? I thought courage was rolling about the floor having a beef with some guy you had a problem with. That ain't courage. That does teach you to go crazy for a couple of minutes. Real courage is an Alcoholics Anonymous. When you're willing to step up and show up no matter what's going on in your life and stay sober one day at a time. That's the real courage that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. And before I came to AA, and before I put those steps in my life, and before I let go, because giving up doesn't work for me. I got to let go absolutely. I was a devout coward. And the way that I was a coward was, when life knocked on the front door, I got a bottle of whiskey and climbed out the back window. It's no coincidence I'm standing in America with an Irish accent. I was a runner, a long-distance runner. And Alcoholics Anonymous taught me that when life knocks on the door, and it will, you stay sober long enough around here, the same things that happen to people out there happen to people in here. We don't get immunity from life. Don't get some sort of get-out-of-jail-free card. The same things that happen to people out there happen to people in here. But what I can do today, I can answer the door. Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me to answer the door. And that's what happened here. And that, I said there with that forgiveness this last 6 months. And I'll tell you how bad it was, boy. I'm telling you. Thank God for AA. And thank God for other guys who have been through this. With my wife 22 years, and I was so angry, bringing in another person into our marriage. Got my 9-year-old daughter, and I get my 8-year-old daughter who's going to be 9 in July, and immediately I turned the gun on myself. I'm saying the one thing I wanted to do right, was to bring up my daughter, and now I've made a complete hash of that too. And I need people outside my life. I need one person who's not as subjective to my life as I am, who could stand back and even in those dark days can see to the wood for the trees and say, Paul, it may appear like that to you now. It may appear that way to you now, but that's not the way it is. And you keep taking these actions, and you'll see that that's not the way that it was. I don't want to do that. And this resentment, I would love, Fox talks about it. If you can jump over the spiritual wall, good luck to you. But most of us need a ladder. And I needed that ladder. And it was one rung at a time to get over that wall that was in front of me in sobriety. And to realize, and talking to you people, talking to people that have been through similar experiences, thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. I had a guy that I was talking to that had been through a similar experience, and he would tell me what I was thinking. And he says, you're thinking this, and then you're going to think this, and then you thought about doing this. I'll be honest with you, I didn't want to take drink, guys, but I wanted to take actions that would have put me directly in the path of a drink. I wanted to go out to her place of employment. I wanted to find out who this guy is, when it happened, how it happened, why it happened, how's it been happening. And my sponsor, they were like, Paul, you can't go there. You can't go there. And it was so bad, I'll tell you, this resentment, I said to myself, this is not going to work. The program, it works under other things, but it cannot. This is just like the Goliath of all problems. When I found out about this, I heard how bad it was. For some reason, I said to myself, I need to open my own bank account. I went straight to the bank. And I was the first guy. It was 8:30 in the morning. I was the first customer. The guy, oh, you're my first customer today. Come on ahead in, sir. How can I help you today? I said, I need to open my own bank account. And he says, no problem, sir. What's your social security number? What's my social security number? I mean, my social security number? It's 0. I couldn't even remember my own social security number. That's how bad it was, just like right here. And this resentment, I would like to tell you that if you can jump over the wall, good luck to you. But I started doing these things. I started taking these actions. I started, as Dawn very articulated earlier on, started to look at my part in this. As Bob read there, look at the other person's part in it. Stop, turn, and try to see the whole picture rather than just that glimpse. And I'm telling you from my own personal experience, and I'm coming out the other, I always thought the opposite of love was hate. It's not. The opposite of love is indifference. And I was emotionally attached because there was that hatred. And I was attached to that. And it's like Emmett Fox in the round the year thing. I don't know if you ever read it. He has the bear hugs kettle analogy. I remember that one. The bear comes along the campfire and it sees the big pot boiling over the fire and it smells the food and some of the water splashes out and the bear, its natural instinct is to grab the pot and it gets burnt. What does it do? It grabs the pot even more. It gets burnt more and more. That's what that's a trap I'll fall into without you people. I will fasten myself to this resentment with so much, that I cannot break free. And then that bondage of self. And so I started to look at the whole picture. And it didn't happen overnight. But this forgiveness was in stages. A guy said to me, Paul, why don't you go home tonight? Make 2 cups of coffee, one for you and one for her. I ain't doing that. But I went home and did it. Because you know what? We've got a daughter together. And even though we're going separate ways, I have to find a way to do spiritual business with this woman for the next amount of years. And it wasn't easy. Walking my daughter into school, and my daughter in the 3rd grade. And she says to me, God love her, she's talking in the first person. She says to me, I don't want to get divorced. I'm too young to get divorced. And I want to lie down on the sidewalk and cry. And I put her into school and I told her it was going to be all right. Because you guys told me it was all right. And they says, Paul, don't worry, she's resilient. You just don't go for the symbolic victory in the house. You keep your mouth shut. You bring their spiritual stuff to the table. You work this program as hard as you've ever worked it. It's easy to work this program in areas of your life you want to work it. It's spiritual to work it in areas you don't want to work it. I had to bring it home till we were going our separate ways. And it's been like, the way I've been looking at it, in the first few months I was so upset because I would free. You know the old, it's an Irish thing, but I'll forgive, but I can't forget. Nonsense. And it was like I was fixed in on this, like an obsession. And the thing about an obsession, guys, it has to be fed. If it doesn't get fed, it spiritually atrophies and dies. And I was feeding it. Even though I was going through the motions and the praying and the forgiveness, I was still feeding this obsession. And a guy says to me, Paul, you've got to amputate yourself from the situation. You've got to amputate. You've got to forgive her. You've got to get down on your hands and knees. And that's what I did. I remember sitting there because I said, what price am I willing to pay? And it's like, for me, it was like an oil tanker. I wanted to be a speedboat where you can just, but it was like an oil tanker. And slowly but surely, it started to turn. And started to turn. Now this weekend, it's funny how God works in your life. When Bob called me last year to come here, my thing was to bring my wife out here for a surprise 50th birthday party. And bring the kids, or my daughter and her daughter from her first marriage, and have a nice weekend, spend an extra day on each end, and have a nice, obviously that's not what happened. But I'm telling you, God works in mysterious ways. Because it's like Bob was reading my mind. Because every talk that's been given here, it was like God says, Paul needs to hear about forgiveness. He needs to talk about it. Paul needs to hear about resentment. Paul needs to hear about this. And it's been every talk that's been given so far has just been, I've been sitting like that there. Yes. Yes. So I'm here for not the reasons I thought I was going to be here. I was going to come here, obviously, but there's other things planned. But you know what? I'm so glad because this weekend has almost like been tailor-made from what I'm going through. I'm not going to be one of these guys that stand up here at these podiums, never had a bad day in sobriety. Sobriety, I tell you, it's not easy. But I realize today there's nothing in my life that a drink's going to fix. And if I've got 5 problems today and I pick up a drink, I got 6 problems and one of them's a major one. And the reason I don't want to drink is people say, oh, drinking, thinking. We'll tell you something. I said last night, I seen people drink again. I thought I'd never drink again. And I want to live in those last 3 steps. I want to live in the realm of the Spirit. And it's not easy, guys, if you're new working through this program. But the way I like to look at it is, and even myself this last few months, it's like when they used to send those rockets to the moon from Cape Canaveral. 4/5 of their energy was used to break the Earth's atmosphere. And the program's like that too. Who wants to admit complete defeat, glass in hand, their minds warped by alcohol? Not me. Who wants to turn their will and life over to the care of God? Not me. Who wants to put this stuff down on paper and then tell another man? Not me. Who wants to put down defects and go to God and ask them? Not me. Who wants to write a list of people I harm and then knock on their doors and ask for forgiveness? Not me. But those are like those 4 fifths, those first 9 steps. But the good news is, just like the rocket, you break free. And you enter the world of the Spirit. And you get the opportunity to wear life like a loose garment. And then I say I'm walking around Alcoholics Anonymous 24/7, a picture of serenity. But I realize today that this program works under all conditions. And the people in Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a guy, the love that we have here, it's second to none. I live in Long Island, and a guy, I told him what happened, a good friend of mine. And he came home from work up to Westchester County, and he drove 2.5 hours in the car. And he knocked on my door. I didn't know he was coming. He says, Paul, I have a separate apartment in Rockaway Beach. Here's the keys. I'm not saying you're going to need them, but they're here. 5 hours, 2.5 hours down to my house, 2.5 hours back in the middle of the week on a work night after he got home from work. He says, here's the keys. And I put them in my car. I never used them, but they were like a spiritual safety valve. The unconditional love that we have here. I could not get up through the last 7 or 8 months if it wasn't for the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And to be able, believe me, I'm not going to fall into that trap, that spiritual pride. Spiritual pride takes more alcoholics down than anything else when you're around here a while. I'm 20 years sober. How can I? Not me. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. I'm not saying sitting at a meeting. This is a different event here. I kept it very in-house with guys I talked with. But I realize today what I'm willing to do, and to share that, and realize that left to my own devices, I'm no good. And so this this program and this forgiveness, it's a daily reprieve. Today I got down on my hands and knees and I prayed for people I didn't really want to pray for, but I was willing to do it. I was willing to do it because I want to live this spiritual life. I don't want to be shackled to self. I want to try to live in the day as much as I can. I want to be free. And freedom and forgiveness and me go hand in hand. So ask yourself, as I ask myself, what price are we willing to pay to get free in Alcoholics Anonymous? I just told you the price that I was willing to pay. Now, if you had asked me 8 months ago, was I willing to pay that price? I'd have said, I'm not sure.